On her second night in the old farmhouse, Mary Whitfield woke to a sound she couldn't explain. The well behind her home, the one everyone said was cursed, was calling. Beneath its wooden cover lay something ancient, something waiting to rise again. Before we begin her journey, please take a second to hit the subscribe button. It means more than you know. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? Chapter 1. The $1 House and the Woman Who Walked Alone. The evening wind drifted through Willow Creek, carrying the scent of dry earth and pine needles. The suns had long since slipped behind the hills, leaving behind a dusky glow that painted the small valley in tones of copper and smoke. In that half-light, a dusty pickup truck rattled down the dirt road and came to a stop in front of what used to be a home, now only a sagging roof, leaning porch, and walls the color of forgotten bones. Mary Whitfield sat behind the wheel for a long time before cutting the engine. She was 45, tall but slender in the way of someone who'd worked with her hands all her life. Her dark auburn hair was tied back messily, a few strands escaping to catch the wind. Her face, once gentle, now carried the tired grace of a woman who had survived more winters than she ever planned to. Her skin was weathered from years under the sun. Her eyes, gray like storm clouds over the plains, held the quiet resilience of someone who had learned to expect nothing and hope anyway. She turned to the passenger seat where a large German shepherd sat alert, ears pricked, eyes intelligent and watchful. Ranger was 8 years old, his coat a blend of sable and silver, his frame strong but no longer youthful. There were white streaks around his muzzle, badges of loyalty earned through years of shared hardship. "We're home, boy," Mary whispered, her voice soft yet carrying the weight of disbelief. Or something like it. Ranger tilted his head as if questioning her certainty. His tail brushed once against the seat, cautious approval. Mary stepped out of the truck and stretched her back, feeling the stiffness of too many nights sleeping in the cab. The air smelled faintly metallic, the way it does near water that has run too long underground. The house stood crooked, its porch boards warped, windows shuttered with broken planks. Behind it, a large oak tree reached out like a guardian, or a warning. Beneath that oak was an old stone well, covered with a rusted iron lid and tangled in weeds. The property had cost her exactly $1. The county auctioneer had smiled thinly when she signed the deed, muttering that no one else had dared to claim the cursed house of Willow Creek. 3 owners before her had left abruptly, one after a night of strange noises, another after livestock vanished without a trace, the last after her husband disappeared near the well. Mary hadn't cared about curses. $1 for 4 walls and a roof, no matter how broken, was more than she'd had in years. After her husband Frank died in a construction accident 3 winters ago, the world had gone gray. She'd sold everything except the truck and her tools, wandering from job to job. Her only companion, the dog who'd once belonged to Frank. Ranger had refused to leave her side from the day of the funeral. She ran a hand over the doorframe. The wood flaked under her touch, soft with rot. Inside, dust coated everything, like a memory refusing to settle. A broken chair, a half-burned candle, a mirror cracked through the center. She looked at her reflection, the fracture splitting her face in two, half woman, half ghost. That night, she and Ranger made a small fire in the old stove. The wind outside moaned through the cracks, and in that lonely sound, Mary thought she heard whispers, soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Ranger's ears twitched. He rose, stiffened, then padded toward the back door, growling low. "What is it?" she murmured, standing slowly. The growl deepened. His fur stood along his spine as he faced the direction of the well. Mary took the lantern and stepped outside. The night was heavy with stillness. Only the oak moved, its branches creaking like old bones. She walked closer, the light trembling in her hand. The well was old, stones mottled with moss. The iron lid was marked with something, a faint carving that caught the glow of the flame. Lines, circles, almost like symbols. She knelt, tracing them with a calloused fingertip. The grooves were deep, deliberate. A sudden gust blew out the lantern. Ranger barked, a sharp echo that bounced across the hills. Mary froze. From the darkness below came a sound, a hollow thud, then another, like something shifting beneath the ground. Her breath hitched. "Probably an animal," she whispered to herself, though the words felt thin, almost foolish. Ranger stayed beside her, tail down, body rigid. Then he did something he'd never done before. He whined. Not out of fear, but out of confusion. As if he could sense something she could not. Mary lifted the lantern again, relit the flame, and peered at the lid. For the briefest second, she thought she saw moisture glimmering between the cracks, water, perhaps, but it pulsed faintly, as if alive. She blinked, and it was gone. Back inside, she locked the door and sat beside the fire until dawn. Ranger refused to lie down, pacing back and forth in front of the door, pausing now and then to listen. The old house creaked inside, settling into the cold earth, but there was another sound beneath it, a soft, distant rhythm, like the slow beating of a heart. When Mary finally drifted into a restless sleep, Ranger moved to the window, watching the well through the thinning mist. In the first light of morning, something shimmered faintly on the stones, an outline of a handprint, wet and fresh, though no rain had fallen in weeks, and from beneath the iron lid, just barely audible, came the sound of a single drop, falling upward. Chapter 2. The Sounds Beneath the Earth. The second night in Willow Creek was colder than the first. A fine mist rolled through the valley, shrouding Mary Whitfield's new home in a veil of ghostly gray. The oak behind the house loomed darker against the half-moon, its branches swaying with a slow, deliberate rhythm that made the shadows crawl. Inside, the fire in the stove had burned low, leaving the air thick with smoke and unease. Ranger slept lightly by the door, one ear twitching at every distant sound. Mary stirred in her chair, a book slipping from her lap. The day had been spent cleaning the house, scrubbing mildew from the walls, patching the roof with whatever scraps she could find, and pretending the place didn't creak each time the wind sighed through its ribs. But fatigue couldn't quiet the restlessness growing in her chest. The memory of the strange markings on the well haunted her thoughts, and the whisper she'd heard last night, soft, almost human, refused to leave her mind. Then, sometime past midnight, it came again. A faint low moan carried on the wind. Ranger's head shot up, ears sharp, eyes glowing in the firelight. The sound seemed to rise from the earth itself, deep and mournful, like something trapped below. Mary held her breath. When it came again, Ranger growled, then barked, loud and sharp, the sound of warning. He ran to the back door, scratching at the wood, his body trembling with tension. All right, Mary muttered, grabbing her lantern. She stepped outside, the cold cutting straight through her worn flannel. The mist was thick enough to hide the stars, and every footstep felt swallowed by the damp ground. Ranger led the way, his nose low, moving cautiously toward the well. When they reached it, the air felt heavier, humming faintly with a vibration she could almost feel in her bones. Mary knelt, brushing aside a tangle of weeds. Beneath them was a wooden board wedged against the base of the well, almost like a patch. She pried it loose with a rusty tool and froze. The underside of the board was carved with a series of lines and triangles, deliberate, precise, and old. She recognized the same pattern that had been etched into the iron lid, but this was different. It was more complete, like a map or a warning. Before she could study it further, a voice startled her from behind. "You're not from around here, are you?" She spun around, holding up the lantern. Standing a few paces away was a tall man in a thick brown coat, his hands raised in peace. He looked to be in his early 50s, broad-shouldered, with a square jaw and a short beard peppered with gray. His eyes were a deep blue, calm but alert, the eyes of someone who spent years reading landscapes instead of people. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, adding to his weathered, quietly confident appearance. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said. "Name's Caleb Turner. Live a few miles east, near the old quarry." Mary lowered the lantern slightly, studying him. "You always sneak up on strangers at midnight?" He gave a small smile. "Only when they start digging around places that have been abandoned for decades. Folks in town were talking about someone buying the Doyle property. Didn't expect it to be a woman brave enough to camp out here her first week." "I'm not camping," she replied. "I live here now. Then you might want to know what you're living on." He stepped closer, glancing down at the carvings. "Those markings, mind if I take a look?" Mary hesitated but nodded. Caleb knelt, brushing his thumb over the wood with practiced care. "Well, I'll be damned," he murmured. "These are survey symbols, old ones. My father was a mining foreman. He taught me to read these before I could read proper English. This pattern here means mineral source, but this triangle within a circle, that's rare. It means water, not just any water, deep mineral water, artesian maybe." Mary frowned. "So, there's something under there?" "Maybe. If the markings are real, this whole land sits on a pressurized water table. Whoever made this didn't want anyone else to find it. That's why it was hidden under the well. Ranger let out a low growl, glancing toward the road. Caleb turned. You expecting company? From the fog emerged the distant glow of headlights. A black truck rolled to a stop near Mary's fence, and a man climbed out, imposing, dressed in a dark vest over a crisp shirt despite the chill. His hair was silver at the temples, neatly combed, his every movement deliberate. Henry Langford. Everyone in Willow Creek knew that name. He owned half the valley and acted like the other half was simply waiting for him to claim it. Langford's face carried the kind of handsome arrogance that came from too many years of getting his way. His gray eyes were cold and assessing as they landed on Mary. So, you're the new owner? He said, voice smooth as oiled leather. Henry Langford. I manage the surrounding lands. Manage? Caleb muttered. You mean own. Langford's smile didn't falter. I prefer steward. Miss Whitfield, I hear you picked up this place for $1. Quite the bargain. I suppose it is, Mary replied cautiously. He stepped closer, gaze sliding toward the well. Then allow me to make you a better offer. I'll give you $100 for the property, cash. You can be out of here by sunrise and find yourself somewhere safer. Safer? She repeated. From what? Langford's expression darkened just slightly, like a shadow crossing the moon. Some things buried in this valley are best left alone. Water that runs too deep tends to drown those who dig for it. Caleb stepped forward, his tone steady but firm. You trying to scare her, Langford? I'm trying to warn her, Henry replied, but people seldom listen until it's too late. He tipped his hat, turned, and disappeared into the fog as silently as he had arrived. For a long time, neither Mary nor Caleb spoke. Ranger stood rigid beside her, eyes fixed on the road long after the truck's rumble had faded. Finally, Caleb said softly, He knows something about this land, something he doesn't want you to find. Mary looked back at the well, at the strange carvings gleaming faintly under her lantern light. Then maybe that's exactly what I'll do. As the mist thickened again, a faint tremor rippled beneath their feet. Ranger whined and backed away, his eyes wide and uncertain. Caleb's gaze flicked toward the well, brow furrowing. You feel that? Mary nodded slowly. Yeah, it felt like something down there moved. Chapter 3. The Secret of the Former Owner. The morning after Henry Langford's warning came wrapped in silence. The fog had lifted, leaving the valley bare and cold, the kind of cold that bites even through wool. Mary Whitfield stood on the porch, staring at the well as the first light hit the frost on the grass. The events of the previous night looped in her mind, Caleb's revelation, the carvings, and that tremor that rippled beneath their feet. It hadn't been her imagination. Something had moved down there. Inside, Ranger padded across the wooden floor, sniffing near the corner cabinet. The old dog had been restless all morning, circling the same spot and whining softly. Mary followed, brushing dust off the cabinet's warped surface. It was heavy oak, too heavy for a house this old, and the hinges creaked like bones. When she opened it, a cloud of stale air escaped, smelling faintly of mold and old paper. Behind a stack of chipped dishes, her hand brushed against something soft. Leather. It was a journal, bound in cracked brown hide. The initials A.D. faintly engraved on the cover. The edges were frayed, the pages yellowed and delicate as moth wings. She sat by the window, light spilling across the brittle paper, and began to read. April 3rd, 1892. They don't believe me. Henry says the water isn't mine, that the land belongs to the company, but I know what I found. I drank from it. My fever broke within the hour. The cattle healed. The water is alive. Mary's breath caught. Henry. It couldn't be the same man. No one could live that long. But perhaps an ancestor. The handwriting was elegant, looping, the voice strong yet weary. Agnes Doyle had written about discovering a spring beneath the house, one that seemed to heal both people and animals. But as the entries went on, the tone changed. Fear crept in between the lines. May 19th. Strange men came at dusk. They said they were from Langford's estate. They offered to buy the property. When I refused, they warned that the water can be a dangerous thing if left in the wrong hands. Mary turned the page. The ink there was smeared, the words frantic. They came again. The well is sealed now. I hid the key where the roots of the oak meet the earth. If someone finds this, beware Henry Langford. The curse is not the water. It's the greed it calls forth. Mary stared out the window, toward the old oak. The roots stretched wide like gnarled fingers clutching the soil. You think she really hid something there, boy? She whispered. Ranger's tail flicked once, as if answering yes. By late afternoon, Caleb arrived again, his truck rumbling up the dirt path. His clothes were dusted with the red clay of the hills, his beard slightly darker in the sunlight. You weren't planning on digging alone, were you? He asked with a half smile. Mary handed him the journal, open to the page about the oak. He read silently, then nodded. I remember hearing about Agnes Doyle when I was a kid. My father used to say she was the only person who stood up to the Langfords. Then her farm caught fire one night. No one ever proved how it started. They worked for hours digging near the tree's base, the smell of damp earth filling the air. Ranger stayed close, his paws muddy, occasionally digging with them, as though he understood. As dusk deepened, Caleb's shovel struck something hard, metal. They cleared the soil to reveal a small iron box, rusted and bound by a corroded latch. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a narrow brass key and a note, barely legible. To whoever finds this, the truth sleeps beneath. The well is not just water, it's a passage. Before they could make sense of it, a faint snap echoed from the woods. Caleb turned sharply, scanning the darkness. You have neighbors who like to spy? Mary shook her head. None I know of. A few moments later, a faint smell reached them. Smoke, not from their fire pit, but sharper, acrid. Mary looked up and froze. The roof of her house was glowing orange. Fire! Caleb shouted, sprinting toward the porch. The windows burst with a roar as flames devoured the old wood. Ranger barked wildly, running around the house. Mary tried to rush inside, but the heat was unbearable. The smoke clawed her lungs, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she saw movement, a figure retreating into the woods. Mary, get back! Caleb grabbed her arm, but she broke free, stumbling toward the back door. My husband's tools! They're still in there! Before she could take another step, the roof cracked, collapsing inward with a deafening crash. Ranger lunged, grabbing the cuff of her sleeve with his teeth, dragging her backward as embers rained down. Caleb threw his coat over her shoulders and pulled her clear of the falling beams. The three of them fell to the ground, coughing, watching as the fire consumed everything. The flames raged through the night, until all that remained was a skeleton of blackened beams and the faint hiss of dying embers. Mary sat in the dirt, her face streaked with soot, the journal clutched to her chest. It wasn't an accident, she said hoarsely. Caleb nodded grimly. No, someone wanted to stop you from finding what's under that well. When the last sparks faded, a strange shimmer glowed beneath the ashes, metal reflecting moonlight. Mary rose, legs shaking, and walked closer. The debris had collapsed inward, revealing a square patch of iron embedded in the ground. Not a well lid, something smaller, reinforced, marked with the same symbol she'd seen on the board. She dropped to her knees, brushing away the soot. The metal was cold to the touch, even near the smoldering ruins. At its center was a small indentation, exactly the size of the brass key. Mary turned to Caleb, her voice barely a whisper. Agnes wasn't hiding the water. She looked at the dark opening below, heart pounding. She was hiding the door. And beneath the rubble, from somewhere deep below, a faint sound began again, like the echo of a heartbeat rising through the earth. Chapter 4. The Living Well. The dawn after the fire came pale and hollow, as if the valley itself had forgotten how to breathe. Smoke still lingered like ghosts above the blackened ruins of Mary's house. The air reeked of ash and damp wood. Mary stood barefoot in the dirt, the brass key clutched tight in her hand, her face streaked with soot, but her eyes burning with quiet resolve. Caleb Turner was beside her, coat torn, one sleeve scorched, yet his presence steady. A man who'd weathered storms both within and without. Ranger limped slightly, a patch of fur singed, but his amber eyes were fierce, refusing to rest. Caleb crouched beside the metal door, half buried under the wreckage. Whatever's down there, he murmured. It's what they were willing to burn a house to keep hidden. He brushed soot from the iron surface and found the small indentation Mary had seen. She knelt beside him, pressed the brass key into the slot, and turned. The lock clicked, echoing faintly, and the metal plate shifted open with a sigh like an exhale from the earth itself. Beneath lay a narrow staircase spiraling into darkness. A faint mist rose from below, warm and shimmering like breath in winter. Mary lifted her lantern. If this kills us, she said, voice trembling but determined, at least we'll know the truth. Caleb gave a soft grunt of agreement and descended first, Ranger close behind. The stairs led to a stone chamber, walls glistening with moisture. The air was thick and humid, carrying the scent of minerals and age. In the center lay a pool, perfectly circular, water rippling though no wind stirred it. It glowed faintly, silver light dancing beneath the surface. Caleb knelt, dipping his fingers. "Warm," he said. "That's impossible. This isn't groundwater. It's an artesian spring, natural mineral water pushed up from deep beneath the rock layers, but I've never seen one glow like this." Mary crouched beside him, the light reflected in her eyes, making them look alive again, younger somehow. "Agnes was right," she whispered. "It's living water." Ranger moved around the edge of the pool, sniffing cautiously. He stopped, ears pricking toward a faint rumble deep below. Caleb frowned. "Pressure's building. It's been sealed too long. This thing could blow." Before Mary could respond, a sharp noise echoed from above, boots crunching on gravel, then voices, harsh, commanding. Henry Langford. "Step away from the well, Miss Whitfield." Mary froze, lantern trembling in her hand. Henry descended slowly, flanked by two men. One was Earl Dunley, a broad, heavy-set ranch foreman with a scar bisecting his cheek, his eyes small and cruel beneath the brim of his hat. The other, younger, was Tommy Graves, barely 20, lanky and pale, his nervous energy betraying inexperience. Henry's pristine white shirt was out of place amid the soot and ruin, but his expression was one of calm, arrogance, a man who believed even nature bowed to his will. "You just don't listen, do you?" Henry said, his tone almost gentle. "I tried to warn you, but now you've forced my hand." Caleb stepped in front of Mary, jaw tight. "You set that fire. You tried to kill her." Henry's smile didn't falter. "I don't dirty my hands with matches, Mr. Turner, but I do what's necessary to keep order. That water belongs to me, same as it did to my grandfather." "Agnes Doyle didn't think so," Mary shot back. "She found it, and you destroyed her for it." Henry's gaze flickered, the only crack in his composure. "That woman didn't understand the cost of power, and neither do you." He nodded to Earl. The big man pulled a revolver from his belt, motioning for Caleb to step aside. Ranger growled low, teeth bared. The sound reverberated through the chamber, sharp and primal. "Careful," Henry warned, voice cold. "I'd hate to see the mutt put down." Mary's heart pounded. "You'll have to kill us all first." For a long moment, the air was still, except for the dripping water. Then Henry's expression hardened. "So be it." He gestured sharply. Earl struck a match and dropped it toward the stairwell. Flames flared, catching the remaining debris at the entrance. Trapped. Caleb lunged at Earl. The two men grappled, boots scraping against stone. Tommy hesitated, eyes darting between the fight and Henry, unsure. Ranger leapt, teeth sinking into Earl's arm, forcing him to drop the gun. A gunshot went off, echoing like thunder. Ranger yelped, stumbling back, a streak of blood on his shoulder. "Ranger!" Mary screamed, falling to her knees beside him. The old dog whimpered, licking her hand weakly. Caleb wrestled Earl to the ground, punching him until the man stopped struggling. The flames above grew brighter, crackling as smoke rolled down into the chamber. Henry turned toward the pool, desperation breaking through his calm. "If I can't own it," he snarled, "no one will." He kicked a lantern toward the water, its flame hissing as it touched the surface. And then the world erupted. A deafening roar burst from below as the pool exploded upward, a column of glowing water shooting toward the ceiling. The blast snuffed out the fire, dousing the stairwell and sending torrents cascading across the floor. Henry staggered backward, soaked and stunned. Caleb shielded Mary as the spray drenched them both. Ranger, though bleeding, pushed himself to his feet, barking as if defying death itself. When the chaos subsided, the chamber shimmered with silver mist. The air felt alive, humming. The water still flowed upward, steady and endless, forming a stream that carved through the ruined floor and out toward the open land beyond. Caleb stared in awe. "It's self-sustaining. The pressure from below, it's feeding itself. This isn't a well anymore. It's a living source." Mary knelt by Ranger, pressing her hand to his wound. The bleeding had slowed, and when she washed it with the glowing water, the dog whimpered once, then licked her hand. Eyes clearer, breath steadier. "You're okay, boy," she whispered, tears mixing with the mist. "We're okay." Henry stood at the edge of the flood, drenched and trembling, staring at the miracle he could no longer claim. For the first time, his voice faltered. "It shouldn't exist," he murmured. "No one will believe this." "Oh, they will," Caleb said. looking toward the stairwell where daylight was breaking through the smoke. Because the whole town's on its way. Outside, distant voices echoed, the sound of horses and people drawn by the explosion. Mary stood, clutching Ranger close, as the light spilled into the chamber. The silver water glowed brighter in response, as if greeting the dawn. And above them, the first rays of sun broke through the valley mist, touching the flowing spring that refused to die. Chapter 5. The Water of Hope. A year passed, and Willow Creek no longer whispered with dread. It sang. The valley that once lay brittle and gray had turned to green, the air laced with the scent of wet earth and new beginnings. Where Mary Whitfield's old house had burned, now stood a sturdy wooden farmhouse with white shutters and a porch wide enough for a rocking chair and a sleeping dog. Beneath the oak, the spring still shimmered silver, its surface never still, always alive. The people of the valley called it the living well. Mary stood at the edge of the field, her hands resting on the worn handle of a hoe, sweat beading along her temple. Her auburn hair had grown longer, streaked now with threads of silver that caught the sunlight like silk. She was stronger than she'd been a year ago, her shoulders firm, her face lined not with sorrow but with purpose. Her eyes still carried the weight of everything she'd lost, but now they also held something new, peace. Ranger trotted beside her, his limp barely noticeable anymore. His fur had regained its luster, though the faint scar along his shoulder was a reminder of the night the earth had awakened. He had become something of a legend in the town. Children from nearby farms came to feed him scraps, calling him the miracle dog. Ranger accepted the attention with dignified patience, always returning to Mary's side as if bound by an invisible promise. Across the field, Caleb Turner worked the irrigation system, a network of shallow trenches that carried the spring's water through the crops. He was tanned now, his once gray beard fuller, streaked darker from sun and soil. His hands were calloused, but his eyes, that deep blue steady as the mountains, still carried the same quiet steadiness. He'd become the backbone of this new community farm, helping townsfolk rebuild after a long drought. He looked up and waved. "That new patch of soil near the ridge is ready. You think we can plant before sundown?" Mary smiled faintly. "If you can keep up, old man." He laughed, a deep, warm sound. "You've been saying that for months, and I'm still ahead of you." Their easy banter carried over the field, mixing with the sound of running water. But beneath the lightheartedness was something gentler, an understanding that didn't need words. Later that evening, the town gathered near the well. Lanterns hung from the oak branches, their golden glow reflecting off the silver water. The townspeople had built benches, planted flowers, and even carved a small plaque that read, "To the woman who brought life back to Willow Creek." Among them was Sheriff Amos Keller, a broad-shouldered man in his 60s, with a salt-and-pepper mustache and a slow, thoughtful demeanor. He had been the one to arrest Henry Langford months earlier after the townspeople testified to his crimes: arson, coercion, and fraud. Amos respected Mary deeply. She reminded him of his late wife, resilient and fiercely kind. As he passed, he tipped his hat. "Evening, Miss Whitfield. You've done what no one else could, made this place breathe again." Mary nodded, humility softening her smile. "It wasn't just me. The land wanted to live. We just listened." Henry Langford's downfall had been swift once the truth came out. The authorities found records of illegal land deals and hidden contracts buried in his office. During the trial, his once loyal foreman Earl Dunley turned witness to save himself, and Tommy Graves, racked with guilt, confessed everything. Henry's face, once so composed, broke under the verdict. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Word around town said his hair turned completely white before he left the courthouse. But Mary rarely spoke of him now. She preferred to focus on the life that had blossomed in his absence. The water had proven miraculous, not in magic, but in strength. Crops thrived even through dry spells, and the livestock were healthier than anyone could remember. The townspeople, once wary of her, now came to her for guidance. Children played barefoot by the spring, their laughter mingling with the murmur of water. As twilight deepened, Caleb approached the porch carrying a small box. His hands, though rough and scarred, handled it with care. He stopped a few feet from Mary, his gaze soft. "You've rebuilt everything here," he said. "The land, the people, even me." She blinked, taken aback. "You were never broken." "Maybe not," he said with a faint smile, "but I was lost." He opened the box. Inside lay a simple wooden ring, polished smooth, carved from the oak that had once sheltered the well. The grain of the wood caught the last of the sunset, glowing gold. "I made it myself," he said quietly. "It's not much, but it's honest, like this land, like you." Mary looked at him, her eyes bright with the reflection of lantern light. For a moment, words failed her. Then she took his hand. "Not everyone finds treasure by digging," she said softly. "Sometimes it's the heart that uncovers it." Ranger gave a low bark, tail thumping against the porch boards, as if offering his approval. Caleb slipped the ring onto her finger, his calloused thumb brushing against her skin. The moment was quiet, unhurried. Two souls who had survived fire, earth, and time, now standing at peace. As night settled, Mary sat on the porch, Ranger's head resting on her knee. The water beyond glimmered in the moonlight, flowing gently, endlessly, whispering a lullaby only the land could sing. Caleb leaned beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. The valley slept, alive again, and as the wind moved through the grass, carrying the scent of life renewed, Mary closed her eyes and smiled. For the first time in years, she no longer felt like she was surviving. She was home. Sometimes, the greatest miracles don't come as thunder or light, but as a quiet spring rising from dry earth. A reminder that even in our lowest moments, God is still working beneath the surface. Mary didn't just find water that day. She found grace. She found proof that when we keep faith, even the ground we walk on can bloom again. And maybe that's the message for all of us. That no heart is too broken, no home too lost, for the Lord to restore. The living well wasn't just under her land. It was inside her all along. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe, because every week we share stories that remind us God's miracles are still happening, one heart at a time. May the Lord bless you, protect your home, and fill your life with living water.